Hi, I'm Anna and welcome back to my channel Building a Business. So for those of you who have been watching my previous videos, I just officially purchased my very first rental property. It's very exciting, but it was not an easy process. Specifically with the lender, I had a lot of problems. I think the problems stemmed for three main reasons. The first being with COVID, a lot of lenders are busier than normal and aren't working in the office, and just a lot of things with any industry that COVID is having a big impact on. The second reason I think my process was a problem is that I'm self-employed, and that can create a lot of issues when you're trying to get a loan. And the third reason is because I just don't think my lender was that great, or at least the main person I was working with on the loan. So with that being said, I want this video to be information for anyone else who's self-employed and trying to get a mortgage, and just tell you what I needed to provide to my lender to get the loan. Now, of course, there are going to be a whole bunch of different factors that affect what you'll need for your loan. So I'm not saying that just because I needed to submit these documents, that means you have to. But I just figure for someone who's self-employed and wondering what is it like to get a loan, for me it was hard, and here is everything that I had to provide. So starting out, they asked for a couple of documents up front that seemed totally normal and reasonable to me. Those documents were 2 months of my bank statements, a copy of my driver's license, 2 years of my tax returns, as in my tax returns for 2018 and 2019, a letter from my partner saying that I pay for half of the rent that we owe, and proof of my payments to him, because he's the one that ends up paying the landlord and I pay him 50% of whatever he paid to the landlord. Pay stubs, as in, proof that I have an income. A rent-free letter. This was specific for my circumstance. So my permanent and billing address is my mom's house. And the reason for that is I'm currently renting. I'm not sure how long I'll be here. I don't want to switch everything over to this address when I might move in a month or two. I thought this was normal, but having dealt with the lender, maybe that's not normal. Maybe I am supposed to switch everything over even if I'm only going to be here for a short time. So I definitely should probably look into whether it's even legal to have my billing address not be the address that I live at. But either way, I had to get my mother to provide a letter stating that I don't live with her, but that that's my billing address, and that I don't pay rent to her or anyone else for the use of that property as the billing address. The next was my college and grad school transcripts. And that's because as a self-employed person, they require 2 years of work history in the same field. And so I started working in October of 2018, so just about 2 years. In fact, when I'm filming this video, it's been 2 years. But when I started getting the mortgage, I was 2 months shy of the 2-year mark. And so therefore they wanted proof that I was in the same industry before then. While I wasn't technically working before then, I was in grad school. And so given that my grad school education was in the same field as what I ended up working in, that time in grad school would count towards my employment history. So I had to provide transcripts showing that I was actually in grad school. And the last thing they wanted from the initial documents was my 1099 miscellaneous forms that I get from my employer to be able to do my taxes. So they wanted 2 years of that, so 2018 and 2019. I provided all of that information from them and then didn't hear back for a month. Then a few days before we were supposed to close, I heard back, and of course they wanted more information. The information they wanted was an insurance quote showing that I am going to get insurance on the property, a copy of my earnest money proving that I did in fact wire earnest money over to the escrow company, my 2 most recent bank statements. I had already provided them 2 months of bank statements when I originally sent in all of the documents they requested, but by this point it had been another month. So they requested 2 months of bank statements. They wanted proof that I filed and paid my 2019 taxes. I had already sent in all my tax documents, so I interpreted that as they needed proof that I actually paid the taxes. So I was able to provide copies of the checks that I wrote to the IRS for my taxes. Next was an explanation of a deposit I had. I had a couple large medical expenses for CT scans, PET CT scans, and VQ scans. And so those medical expenses really added up. So I was really lucky that my grandmother offered to cover the cost of those expenses. And so I paid for the scans when they happened, and then my grandmother reimbursed me. So I got a check from her deposited into my account during the time that I was under contract. I know that's a no-no, so I should have thought about that and not deposited the check until after I closed. But either way, I deposited the check, so they wanted me to explain why I got that check. I explained it, they didn't seem to have a problem with it, so we were moving on. And the next thing they wanted, understandably, was proof that I had the funds to close. So essentially they wanted proof that I had transferred money from my savings account into my checking account so that as soon as we were clear to close, I had that money ready to wire. Generally, it takes a few days for money to transfer from a savings account or other account into your checking account, and so they just wanted to make sure that I had already done that process, which I had. Then a few weeks later, they asked for my 1099 miscellaneous forms again for 2019. Somehow they lost it, I guess, because I had already provided that. They also again asked where I worked before my current job because I haven't quite been working for 2 years. I explained again that we had already been over that I was in school and that I had provided the transcripts. So again, there seemed to be some information lost or documents lost throughout the process. I did go back and double check that I had submitted everything that they were asking for, so they had it. It was just an issue of misfiling or not seeing it. I'm not really sure. They then wanted a letter from my employer saying that I had indeed worked for them since October of 2018, which my employer was able to provide. They had a couple questions about inquiries on my credit report. And so during the process of getting this loan, I looked into a couple different mortgage companies. And so all of these different mortgage companies ran a credit report on me. So it shows up on my credit report now that these various companies checked my credit. So I just had to explain to them what the credit inquiries were about and why they showed up. They then were asking about my rent again. I'd mentioned earlier that I provided a letter from my partner stating that he pays rent to the landlord and I pay him 50% of the rent to his account. I provided the receipt showing that I had paid him, but they wanted proof from my bank account that that money that I paid him actually came out of my account. So I did that. Then, in one of the weirder things that started raising the alarm bells for me, they asked for proof that I don't own my mother's home. As I've explained in previous videos, that makes no sense to me. How do you prove that you don't own something? You know, it just doesn't really make sense that someone would have proof that they don't own something. If they do own something, hopefully they have proof of that, but having proof that you don't own something doesn't make sense to me. So I asked them, what does that mean? How am I supposed to prove that? And they responded saying that they would like the property tax information on my mom's home. So she was able to give me her property tax information, which I sent to my lender. And after doing so, I felt really badly about that. My mom was totally willing to help me out. However, it just felt like a huge breach of privacy, kind of, to have to send personal financial information about someone other than myself to the lender. I would understand if they would want some written statement from my mom saying I don't own the property at all, but for her to have to provide financial information about herself and her property just didn't really make sense to me. And so that's around the point when I started deciding I'm not sending them more information about anyone other than myself. I would be happy to send them whatever they want about me, but I'm not going to send financial or other personal information about anyone else because I am the only one trying to get this loan. There are no other co-signers on this loan. So when they started asking about my employer's financial information, I shut it down. What they asked for was 2 months of bank statements from my company. I don't own my company, and so I don't have access to that financial information. It is possible that if I asked my employer for 2 months of financial information about the company that they would give it to me, but even if they were willing to help me out in that way, it just really didn't feel right to ask for that. In addition to that, they wanted 12 months of proof from my employer that they had indeed sent the checks from their account that I claimed as my pay stubs. Why they needed proof that it came from my employer when it says on the check, on the top of a check, it says who it's from, so I have that information. It all felt to me pretty weird. Maybe this is totally normal, but to me it just felt completely unreasonable that I would have to provide financial information from my employer to get a loan for me. They also wanted a year-to-date profit and loss statement from my employer and a copy of their business license to prove that they're a real company. Again, I felt completely uncomfortable with this. So to get around this, I asked my employer to write a letter basically stating that I was an employee, that it was a real company, provide my year-to-date income, and basically kind of address in written form the questions they had, which my employer did, and I'm very grateful for that. Second, I emailed the lender saying, I don't own any portion of the company I work for, and so I don't have access to most of the information you're asking for. And third, I'm not going to ask my employer for that information because it's not appropriate. And they responded saying, I don't know if we can get you the loan if you can't provide us this information, but we'll talk with the underwriter and try to figure it out. Eventually they came back and said, okay, we don't need that information. What we need instead is a profit and loss statement for you. In the email, they made it sound to me like they wanted basically my personal budget and how much I have made and spent this year. So I included that, and I showed my income to date, and then I showed everything that I had spent money on, including rent, food, transportation, everything else. And then the end up result was essentially how much money I have saved so far this year. I sent that profit and loss statement to them, and it immediately confused them. I guess what they were wanting was a business profit and loss statement, which looking back makes total sense that they would want a business profit and loss statement, because what is a personal profit and loss statement? It's basically just your budget. However, like I said, their email kind of implied that they wanted it to be a personal one. Either way, they wanted me as a self-employed person to fill out a business profit and loss statement. So this statement was pretty boring because it basically just showed my income that I got and then the expenses that I had. And in terms of my business expenses that I write off on my tax return, the only business expenses I have in general are transportation to and from meetings and job sites and my home office deduction. For 2020 so far, I don't have any transportation write-offs because, like so many other people, I've been working from home. However, I do have my home office write-off, and so I did provide them that, which ended up being, I believe, $460 if I remember correctly. And so it showed my income and subtracted $460, and that was essentially my profit for this profit loss statement. Once I sent that in, I waited a couple days, and eventually they told me I got my loan, which was very exciting. If you watched my previous video, which I'll link up here, you will know that even closing became a nightmare and didn't go smoothly at all. However, that's a different issue and unrelated to this video, which, having watched this far, I hope you have a better sense of what you might need to provide to your lender, especially as a self-employed person when you try to get a mortgage on your first or 10th or 20th property. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it below and subscribe to get more videos like this every Thursday.